Confucianism. It's tonight's topic. I'm going to attempt not to do this over 2 weeks because sometimes sometimes so much I get into it and I go too long, and I think, maybe we can condense. And I'll try to go a little faster without going too fast to do all 6 things in one night. Fair enough? Sure. I'll change the order around a little bit. We'll start with ultimate concern. Confucianism is a lot like Buddhism. There are no gods. Some people don't even call Confucianism a religion as much as a philosophy, although it certainly shares some other things to do with religious ideas. I think most people would consider it more of a religion in its basis. It's named after Confucius. How's that? Or Master Kong, if you're up there. Founded by Confucius. I don't know, Confucius. Just fun to say, right? But you know him as
Confucius.
One of the traditional. I tried to find the picture. The thing that sticks out is the long beard and the big puffy eyes. Those are one things that I think about when I think of him. Confucius. There's some debate. We're not sure what's actual fact or what's been conjecture, but about 550 BC is when Confucius was born. He was born in China. Confucianism begins in China. It is largely a Chinese faith, although it does spread. We'll talk about that in a few minutes.
What BC?
551, exactly, if you want to know that. In China at this time, things were changing. Before his birth, the feudal system was sort of the way to go, which means, land ownership, become the power bases and that sort of thing. But just before and during his life, there was great instability in China as this feudal system was kind of breaking down. And as it broke down, warring tribes began to come in, and they're really just kind of tearing apart what was the established order of China. Confucius's family had at one point, I don't know where it went, had been quite wealthy, but they lost most of their wealth and their position of power during all of this conflict. And so it was out of that kind of geopolitical reality that some of the ideas that would become Confucianism were built in this young man, Master Kong, or however you want to say his name, Confucius. He decided that as a well-educated, though not necessarily well-to-do person, that the only way society would get better is if people, particularly those who ruled, would govern righteously, would govern justly. And so that was kind of the undergirding framework of his thinking, of what would become Confucius.
Confucianism. We should start one of our own Confucius religions now. See if that would work.
It's a good philosophy in that sense, in that governing justly, governing righteously would certainly benefit any place. And so because of that, he hoped, what am I doing? To rise up and find himself a position with the government somehow so that he can enact this plan to be a just and the right ruler, but it never really happened. He kind of got on the lower levels of government. There's no consolidated government. He's kind of a central Chinese guy, the province of Lu, Lu. If you're curious, we'll see a map in a minute that shows where that is. So he never got far enough up to have a personal influence or to have any input into those with power. And so he couldn't enact his strategy. So having failed in that, he began to travel around trying to expose as many people as he could to his philosophy, to his ideas, and he did that and began to see Confucianism spread. Here is kind of a long-term picture. Where he's from is, as you can see, kind of central China here, but not through his personal travels, but the influence of Confucianism. This is a modern kind of map that we would see. Some in Vietnam. As always, the Himalayan mountains protect India, and that's Nepal and that subcontinent. Over into South Korea, Japan, even into Taiwan, which is a Chinese territory or whatever until relatively recently. And so this is where it went. This book mostly came about because of his personal travels. Now, he did gain enough influence that in the year 136, Confucianism became the official state religion under the Han Dynasty. So what's about 400 years after he lived, the faith that he founded, Confucianism, did reach at least that much into the governmental places. So it was the official religion. At the same, by the way, next week when we talk about Taoism or Taoism, they kind of have a concurrent growth, and there's a lot of overlap between some of the ideas of Confucianism, some of the ideas of Taoism or Taoism. They kind of grew up together and influenced the Chinese culture greatly and influenced this part of Asia greatly. Today, there's only about, I think, 6 million Confucians in the world. It's not a huge religion. Primarily, you're going to find its main influence in China, though it is certainly not the state religion of China anymore. I don't know what we would call that, but it's certainly not Confucianism.
Communism.
Yes.
You are not allowed to have
And again, maybe that's why Confucianism had some benefit, because some people would say it's not really a religion. So Confucius is the founder, but there are two other fellows we need to talk about who probably did as much, if not more than, to define and spread Confucianism than Confucius. The first one is Master Ming, or Mencius. You can see he has a different beard. I don't know, traditional picture. He is a disciple of Confucius. He comes along not too long after him. He's in the same geopolitical reality, the warring states. The difference is he is nobility. He's got some wealth and power behind him. As Confucius was educated, he has that plus some. And so he wanted to use his position, having been exposed to the ideas of Confucius, to help people come to economic self-sufficiency. So he was all about tax reform, welfare for the elderly, closing that gap between the wealthy and the poor, even as a person of nobility. And he came to be really the most well-known interpreter of Confucius's teachings. When we get to their sacred literature in a few minutes, you'll see one of them is the Book of Mencius, because he wrote extensively about Confucianism. Probably the one most responsible for modern Confucian thought is this fellow. One of his some people call his version of Confucianism idealized Confucianism, because he believed in the fundamental goodness of all human beings. People are good. So interestingly enough, it was him that came up maybe with the idea that all of us, being fundamentally good, should practice what's called Zhen, which is the desire to seek the good of others. He saw good in people, and he thought that Confucianism would help them to seek the desire to have good in others. Confucianism does not believe in an afterlife per se, like a heaven or hell. Mencius said that each person has a heaven of sorts within their heart. And you have to grasp and understand and begin to live out of the heaven that is inside of you to make the world a better place. He'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony, is what I'm saying. If you're a Coke fan, but nonetheless. Mencius. So he's the second and the main interpreter of Confucius' teaching, one of his disciples. A little bit later than him comes this fellow, Hunzu. His big departure from Confucius and Ming, or Mencius, is that he believed in the fundamental evil of all human beings. He looked at things and said, dude, really? You think people are good? I don't. I think, in fact, they're inherently evil. They have no moral compass. They're always in danger of spiraling into corruption, into disorder, into violence. That sounds like...
He's certainly closer to reality.
He certainly has a much more negative view of things.
The way you've explained things, that you outlined the Democrats and the Republicans, as far as I'm concerned.
I don't know. I think that's maybe oversimplifying. Never mind. I'm not touching that one. You're not drawing me into that talk.
Okay.
There we go. So one of his thoughts is that since we are all inherently evil, that good does not come naturally, The only way to be good is to practice being good. You got to practice to be good. There's no supreme deity that's going to hold you accountable and punish you if you're not good. You've just got to somehow in yourself practice and persevere to be good. How well does that work for most of us? Works for a while. But ultimately, I think we've all found out that that's not the case. So while there's no God, this philosophy, this religion hinges on these three people and their writings and their teachings. A little bit of conflict between them, but they form the basis of what we would see as Confucianism, this philosophy that wants to affect society. If you want to know about Confucianism, we have to talk about their sacred writings. There's two sets. The first one is called the Four Books. The second one is called the Four Books and the Five Classics, excuse me. So it is. So 9 different volumes of work. The Four Books, the first one is called Great Learnings. This is basically a moral idea, a moral treatise, how to cultivate, self-cultivation of morals. The key to morality is learning. The more you learn, the more you investigate things, the smarter you become, the broader your exposure is to knowledge, the more likely you are to be moral, which doesn't always work out that way, in my opinion, but that's another story for another day. So this is the first of the books. Learning becomes very important. In fact, when we talk about temples or worship, there really aren't temples. There are some shrines for Confucianism, but they don't go to temple. They don't worship in public ways. If there are shrines, most of them started out as schools. Learning was so valued based upon some of the writings. This was thought to be written by Confucius himself, although there's some dispute about whether or not he actually wrote it. The most famous of the sacred writings is one you may have heard of, the Analects. This is a collection of Confucius's teaching and sometimes takes the form of his discussion with his disciples. Again, it emphasizes learning and the way to, the first step in knowing the way to good life is through learning. The good life for Confucius in the Analects involves good governance. Ultimately, that's his goal. As I said, he comes into a world where there's these competing warring factions, where whatever structure there was in society was breaking down in the feudal system. And so he thinks the key to everything is good leadership, good governance. And he outlines some of those ideas. And a way to be a good leader, a way to be a good moral person is to learn. So you can follow his teachings, particularly on that regard in the next one. This is more a collection of his teachings and his discussion with the disciples. This is more kind of a treatise, a moral treatise of things. The third book is that disciple, the book of Mencius. This takes the form of conversations Mencius had with Confucius, things that they talked about. A lot of talk about the emperor, good governance. A lot of talk about the goodness of humanity. Here's one of the apparently more well-known passages, though I'd never heard of it. One of the ways he talks about the goodness of humans is he sees it. If any human sees a child teetering on the edge of a wall about to fall, we all react. We all know that's bad. We all know that could lead to disaster. He said the real step to good governance through learning is who will actually react and try to do something and not just stand back and it's good. Who's going to get in the fight? Who's going to go up there? Who's going to maybe even put themselves on the line to rescue the child? That's the process that we go through from the good that's inside of us, recognizing trouble, to being actually those who respond to the situation and bring about goodness, who nurture and cultivate that part of us that sees the bad in the world and actually tries to make it better. The last of the 4 books is the doctrine of the mean. The mean sounds like you're good. Here's the doctrine of the mean. No, it's not that at all. Mean, not in the sense of mean, but this is the idea of finding balance and harmony in one's life, the mean, more of a mathematical term than a mood term. Mean, the average, to find that sense of balance, to engage in the moral cultivation that's necessary to find balance in your life. Again, all of these are aimed primarily at nobility, at leaders, at governance. Most of Confucianism is directed there. That's its goal, to somehow affect the leaders. And as the leaders lead well, the whole of society is improved. So that's the 4 books. The next are the 5 classics. Quick overview. First is the classic of history. Shu Qing is their word for classic. So the classic of history, this is basically telling the events of ancient China, from the early sage kings to the history of the Jia, the Shang, and the Zhou dynasty. So kind of a narrative history of what's happening in China. History, as we saw with Buddhism, personal history, and now as we see with Confucianism, plays a big part in how these religious leaders' thoughts are shaped. And so the history is retold. The second is the classic of poetry. This covers a range of issues: love, marriage, agriculture, daily lives, war. It's believed that Confucius himself selected the 305 poetic passages in that from a much broader collection of poetry. And so this is the more artistic side. The third is the classic of rights. These are societal norms, governmental organization, proper conduct to maintain harmony in the empire. So this goes on a bigger scale. The history of things, the art here, and now this is how to deal with the empire. The third one is the classic of changes, which is more along the lines of a system of divination, which seems out of character with Confucianism as a whole. It's typically not a very spiritually minded religion in the sense of another dimension of spiritual beings. That's not norm. It does borrow from Taoism, that symbol I'm sure you are familiar with, of the yin and the yang, the balance that has to exist. So a lot of this book, this classic, talks about that yin-yang harmony that's needed. But again, that yin-yang is not really a Confucian idea. It's a much more Taoist idea. But because we have these 2 concurrent religions growing, they borrow from each other. The last one, the Spring and Autumn Annals. This is a lot like the classic of history. While this tells the story of China on the big picture, this tells the story of the particular province that Confucius was born in, the Lu province. Confucius is thought to have written the story of the history that affected him so personally. So these 9 books, the 4 books, the 5 classics, are the sacred writings. And again, by saying sacred, it almost, we're using that term in our class for all the religions. It's more likely to say the most fundamental, the most important, the most foundational writings for understanding. Because again, this isn't, as we think of religion, as we think of gods and deities and moral codes and all that, this is not that at all. Even as we get to those parts of talking about Confucianism, we'll see that that's not the case. But if you want to learn about it, these are the books that have the best kind of picture of what it is and where its thought processes came from. Thoughts, comments, questions, or complaints? While I take a drink. Yes, ma'am.
Did it change China? Did Confucianism? What you said, it was born in a time from violence and.
Yeah, the feudal system of landowners and lords and properties was breaking down, and we know China has many dynasties after that point in time. By the 150s, Confucianism was the state religion of China. So yes, by just 400 years after his death, it had changed. It had gained enough influence to be named, this is how we're going to exist as a state religion here in China. So How long that lasted is really the question, because it wouldn't, while there are Confucians in China today, I don't think it affects the governmental structure or thinking of who they are now. All right, worldview. I'm changing the order up just to keep you on your toes. You on your toes?
Yeah.
I just got a picture of a nasty radar. So apparently it's going to get really gross.
Around seven,
The
it's
next
supposed to be a lot of rain here.
So, it's raining now, so I will ask, since we're here, if anybody needs to scoot out before the bad rain comes, feel free.
There on the bicycle,
How bad?
but yeah,
Yeah,
if he
rain.
says it's bad, just stay and you're gonna do the wrong way.
I know he's a man of God.
He's very
Listen
good.
to it, yes.
He's very good in doing the wrong.
You got a radar show?
Oh,
This is the radar.
Joyce, I hope we're sleeping there because we need to do this.
Oh, that's what he does.
I have a long ride home.
And I assume it's gonna be.
Yes.
It is.
We're gonna get ready to do that.
I think that 8 or 10 plus numbers may like.
Well, I think you're 30-mile-an-hour.
Okay.
Sorry, we're cutting out.
Say bye.
Thank you.
Please be safe.
Yes, please.
Bye.
Ride the bike?
Right.
Yes, he's on a bike.
We're on bicycle.
That's why you need to go.
Picture.
I saw him last
I'm
week.
trying to act like kids, it's just, it's exercise.
How long of a ride do you have to get where you're
Come
going?
on.
Okay, pedal fast.
Yeah.
Thank
You
you.
might be, you're making your shower before you make it home.
Dinner was good, thank you.
No,
Let's call see you next week. Love it.
All right.
We're off. See you. What's there? No, right.
a man after my own heart.
Worldview, back to whatever we were trying to do. Confucianism worldview. I don't have a lot to say about this, except it kind of goes to this. This is the main concept we want to talk about. Jin, sometimes Ren, R-E-N. Ren is the idea that you want to seek the good of others. That's the whole thing. The worldview of Confucianism is, as an individual, how can I develop in my life the moral character I need that not just keeps me good, but seeks the good of everybody else?
That's what I believe in.
Well, you may have heard
Believe it.
one of the ideas of Confucianism is a Christian idea, only Confucianism states it negatively. Do not do to others what you don't want them to do to you. What you would have them, not whatever. Instead of do unto others as you would, it's don't do unto others as you don't want done to you. This idea. So that summarizes the concept of Jin. And our life consists of 5 key relationships. So in wanting the good of others, you will be in mostly these 5 relationships, ruler to subject. So the ruler is to seek the good of the subject is to want the best for the ruler. Father to son or parent to child, although it is much more patriarchal, being an ancient culture and that sort of thing. Husband to wife, father seeking the good of the son, the husband wanting the good of the wife. It's really hierarchical, and in addition to patriarchal. The ruler is superior, the father is superior, the husband would be considered superior to the wife. And the superior should always want the good of the inferior. The elder to the younger, this will be very important. And then the friend to the friend is one of the only mutual relationships, but could still be affected by where you might find yourself. If you're the older friend would be considered the superior to the younger friend. The higher class, more powerful one would be considered the superior to the less powerful one. So all of life is based on relationships. That's their worldview. And in the relationships, there is hierarchy. We deal with these things. And in those relationships, based upon hierarchy, we must seek the good of the other, particularly the one in the superior position, looking out for the good of the one that would not be. This would stand in contrast to the one that has the higher position seeking to exploit, for instance, the one of the lower position. That the ruler shouldn't exploit the subject, shouldn't do anything to abuse that relationship, but should do whatever can be done to bring about the good of the subject. So obeying government's laws, showing respect and commitment to one's family, living a moral life, vitally important. If you're on the downslope here, those are the ways that you show respect and bring about the good of those who are there. Okay, my wife keeps texting me.
Worried about you making it home.
He's got a long ways to go.
Not leaving.
Okay.
I know.
So the worldview is really around these core relationships that we're all involved in. And as we are in these relationships, it is there wanting the good of the other that we build a greater society. It's a very communal idea, which leads a little bit to the social organization. If life is based on relationships, in those relationships, this principle of, I would say, Yao, I don't know how they would say it, is vitally important. It means filial piety. Do we know what filial piety is? I guess that's my goal next to describe it. In this hierarchical system, there is the sense that there is, as I already said, there's one that outranks the other. One of the most important, particularly filial, is more about family, that the older outrank the younger. The grandparents, great-grandparents, parents, all of those are higher than the younger, the children or their grandchildren. And they are owed respect and deference. And so as we are in these relationships, what keeps the order of our society is understanding our place in the relationship and living in light of that, showing the proper respect and deference. 5 more minutes, we're all going to be good. You know what
I'm still here.
There we go.
And I,
So, what's that?
I'm,
We got people online. They're like, "What's going on?" Weather's fine where we are.
Very different on the other side of the screen.
Yes. So notice a lot of times when we talk about faiths and social organization, we talk a lot about their religious structure, how their religion, how they organize through things like temples or churches or synagogues or mosques. That organization of their religious society and how that forms their community. For Confucianism, the family is the primary place you're going to find community. And this idea of deference and respect to your elders, particularly to your oldest living and even your dead ancestors, shapes how they view everything. Which leads us to ritual acts. We don't have religious ritual acts here. We don't have a temple we go to and offer sacrifices. We don't have gods that we have to obey. The ritual acts really boil down to what is called ancestor veneration, which means family members that are older deserve your respect, even those who have died. So they have the concept in Confucianism that we all have a dual soul, for whatever it's worth. There is the Po and there is the Han. Those are the two parts of the soul. The Po, I want to get this right, is the lower soul, the soul that exists in the body. The Han is the higher soul. It is the upper or intellectual soul. So that they believe when their ancestor dies, this dual soul concept works this way. The Po, the lower soul, is buried with the body, but the Han, the upper soul, continues to live, to exist. And because their upper soul still exists, their ancestor, though they have died, is still owed veneration. still must be respected and still has a part to play in their life. Now, this is not the upper soul goes to heaven. There's no heaven. There's no nirvana. There's no reincarnation. So don't hear any of that. That's not part of this. You have one life, you die, the lower soul is buried with the body, the upper soul exists somehow.
Like the sweet around, spirit.
Like a spirit, you could say, but actually almost not so much spirit or ghost, more like a demigod that can influence your life in the here and now. And so the way to keep your ancestor close, to keep them part of your world, to keep them interested in your goings on, to keep them on your side, is to provide the proper veneration. And the way you do that is through something called an ancestral tablet. These will look like gravestones, basically, and they're kept as a reminder of an ancestor that has died. Here is these are kept in homes. So you're venerating your ancestors. This is a home that all of these, they look like gravestones, right? They're smaller, obviously. They have different words on them, different Chinese characters on them. And this individual is honoring his ancestors every time he goes into his personal shrine. All of these are his ancestors that representing their upper soul, their hun, that is still interested in him, still looking out for him, still wants to play a part in his life. And so he has this place in his house where he goes and he, well, I don't want to say worships because that's not the right word. Maybe pays respect to them. He does that. You see this little box here. In that box, looks like that one has a lot of ash in it. They bring offerings to them. They bring offerings of food. They feed the spirits need to be fed. They have a very elaborate process when an ancestor dies, when a family member dies. They carefully wash and place their body in special clothing before they're buried. And then daily, they bring sacrifices of food and incense that are brought before all of these tablets to somehow care for the souls of the dead. And by doing that, this is a tangible way the Confucian shows respect and veneration to their ancestors. Make sense? Kind of hokey, kind of weird. Again, this isn't a community. This isn't a graveyard like we have today, a cemetery where we might go to see a headstone. This is in your personal residence. Obviously, you can see generations of ancestors. Probably these have been passed down for this individual for many years, and he has collected them because these all represent his ancestors that he still must respect. He still must pay reverence to.
I work in a house that this guy's got this one little area where he's got the Virgin Mary. But he's got all of his dead family members, pictures or something of them there. And it's almost like that.
Yeah,
And it's not an area that I'm allowed to touch.
I'm sure it's not.
So I just thought of it, how we get into these things.
So might have some connection.
That's what
to that
I'm
sort of
thinking.
thing, to Confucian ideas. And so there you go. Interesting. Any other comments, thoughts, questions?
I hate for a hurricane to go by that house.
Hate for what?
A hurricane to go by that house.
It could be bad news. Just in the sense it would.
I know, so it's sad.
Scatter the-
It gets so focused on that physical thing, and if something happens, a house fire or anything, that destroyed it, I don't know how they would.
Yeah.
How you can reconcile with that, because like somehow you need that physical tangible site to do whatever veneration you're doing.
Ancestral veneration, it was over. Ancestral tablets, ancestor veneration. So this is basically their ritual. They don't give money, they don't do any of the typical religious stuff. They're connected to their ancestors. Because they have still, in their mind, that these ancestors still have an influence on his morality, his whatever. And by showing veneration to them, he learns in this key relationship so that he can then offer good, or what was it? Hold on.
There's a, like, I mean, I don't know, I have some Catholic friends, I mean, that say, you know, like, it's one particular one I'm thinking about, his father died 6 months ago and he just had a baby. And so it's like saying he was remembering his father's, you know, on a 6 month anniversary of his death, whatever, and somebody had posted, well, he's still looking out over you and over it. I mean, and they're Catholic, they're not, and I don't, is there a kind of a connection in that thought that, I don't know.
I mean,
Did we do Catholicism, did I miss
we
Catholicism?
didn't do
No,
that.
we didn't.
That would be toward the end, whatever that is.
Yeah, okay, no, I'm just, I didn't think we did, but I was just like, I didn't know. I think sometimes people don't believe that, because they want some kind of sense of that interaction that's, you know, that. Especially if, I was just curious if there was some kind of.
Well, with the Catholics, still, they prayed all these saints, and we were just on a big traffic, and somebody came down and keys with the cat and got loose, and it was a big mess, but she was praying, she said, well, I tried to test all religions, and she prayed to Francis for whatever the purpose. She had prayed to one saint for this, now tonight she's praying to Francis for this, and I'm like, I'm praying to Jesus, you know, but yeah, it's like we have all these other things.
But I don't know if it was just kind of a thought process that kind of dwindles this way and has really nothing to do with Confucianism at all. It's just something, you know, that they grasp onto as a.
Well, I think to
I
some
mean, I,
degree,
you know,
all of us,
whenever I go to Pennsylvania, I go to my favorite Pennsylvania. That's mostly for just remembrance and.
Yeah.
And it is respect to them, but it's not like, I mean, every single time we go there, it's like, we know you're not here, you know, it's just, I guess more for soothing of our own souls, I guess, maybe, but I don't,
well, we're all attached.
yeah, it's an attachment.
But going there, doing that during your yearly trek, or whatever you want to call it, that's, I lost that train of thought, but anyway.
It's a remembrance and, you know, even though,
I'm sorry, if I don't get this out, it won't come out, right? And I'm not even sure it's gonna work at this. So I feel like I have an observation where we're under the ultimate concern outline, where we say there are no gods. But the word veneration, which admittedly I had to look up, and all that knowledgeable, means great respect and reverence, which is how I think of God, you know, revere him. So if they revere their ancestors and their ancestral spirit in this kind of a way that is their deity, their God, but an idol.
But they don't, you would say from the Confucian idea that these ancestors become like gods, demigods,
They don't have
beings
one.
that have a connection to this world and can bring positive benefit to their life. And basically, as they venerate them, they increase their moral whatever goodness, and then can offer it to others. But really, it is a type of worship, yes. But they don't think of them as gods as we think of gods who are.
Yeah, it's a different cultural kind of thing.
Definitely. So. Ritual acts there, last one is moral code. There isn't a 10 commandments. There isn't like do this and don't do this, even like we've seen their word is T or D. I don't know why most of their words can be spelled like Jen or Ren, T or D. I don't know what makes the difference, if it's different dialects, if it's taking an Asian language and putting it in a Western language or not. These things mostly have to do with perfecting your virtue. That somehow you are trying to become a better person. Really, the main emphasis of their moral code is for those who are the higher, particularly those who have some sort of governmental or leadership role. That they would choose peace over power. Obviously, the temptation of being in a place of authority is that the power goes to your head. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely, as the saying goes. And, you can see it in every walk of life, that can be the case. So this moral code says, even as you gain more power, your goal is to have peace, to bring peace, that cultivate peace in all your relationships, not to abuse, again, not to abuse those under you. Righteous governance, here we go, we're talking, the moral code has to do with how a superior relates to an inferior. So if you are a superior, you need to treat righteously those who are under you. You should act in humility. You should be benevolent. These all are different ways of saying and describing this idea of te or de or t or d or however you say it in their language. To be right, to be peaceful, to be humble, to be benevolent. And if you achieve that, you must, to be a leader, you must possess T to rule justly. And when you possess it, you are known as a Zhongzu, which means, I don't have the literal translation, but it has the idea of like a moral superhero. If you possess T, if you possess all of these qualities in your governing, you are, it means ideal. You like look somewhere what it means. It literally means ideal person. Picture like the superhero, the moral superhero who has mastered all of these things in a way that allows them to govern, to lead, to be in a position of authority better than if they didn't have any of these particular qualities. That's the 6 things. It's the last slide.
Can you go back to the?
Sure. So you can see very much, at least I feel like both Buddha and Confucius, their faiths are very much tied to their early life experiences and what happened to them and how they spent the rest of their life trying to figure out how to make that not happen to anybody else. We had a pretty good society, and then, feudal system. A feudal system is very much there are certain people that are here and certain people are here. If you're a landowner, you have a lot of land, if you have a little bit of land, if you work the land, it's a clear line of authority. Everybody's treated fairly. Now the warring people come in. It's not fair. It's not just. How can we get back to that? It's a lot of that. So you can also see why religion isn't really a great word for it.
Yeah.
And it is more philosophy of life than it is a true religion. But there are 6 million people in the world, which is not a lot of people. 6 billion, 600 million. It's either 6 or 6. It's like less than 1%, right, of the people in the world practice this. On the other hand, you can see if people would practice this, the world might be a good place. As Joyce said, how can we get this in our leaders more often? Because we know they don't always. So I managed to take us right to the time when the rain picks up. So you can all go out into congratulations.
We're gonna hang up.
You're hanging here.
Had enough of it.
Any questions, comments? Before
Yeah, you know what I like, the religions and also when I see this. Belonging means people.
belonging,
Belong to something. The other expression.
right?
Then, it's very big part. The human being.
Sure.
We belong to families.
Good observation. Any online comments, questions, complaints?
Nope.
Well, we're gonna go fight a hurricane.
Nope. I got my
Here's Julianne.
microphone to work.
Good job. We're proud of you.
Well, thank you. I just had to go back to settings and play around. So anyway,
Glad you got it to work.
thank you.
All right. Well, I'm gonna pray, then we're gonna go. Or stay, really, whatever floats you. Father in heaven, we thank you for your love and grace to us. We thank you for revealing yourself to us. through the scriptures and through the work of your Spirit in our life, for drawing us to you, for the grace and salvation that you have provided. Lord, while we study these other faiths, we know that while we would not subscribe to these particular tenets, we do see value in them. And in some ways, you can even tie it to who you are and the fact that all of humanity in some way craves a relationship with their creator, and it's expressed in different ways, even as Confucius grappled with his circumstances and how to best express that. Father, help us to have compassion, whether we meet someone that is in one of these faiths or just in general not a believer, to see the many ways people do and have tried to order their lives to find you, and help us to be those ambassadors that help point them to you and your love and your grace. So we do pray tonight for those that are going to be affected by this hurricane, even as we hear it outside here, particularly those as it strengthens and head toward the panhandle that are in its path. So we ask that you would watch over them. We've been on the receiving end of some hurricanes. We know what it is. We know what it's like. We know the damage. We know the way it can certainly disrupt lives. But I pray as much as possible, you would keep that to the bare minimum, Lord. Help people to evacuate as necessary to get out of the way. And Lord, even if you could miraculously watch this thing fizzle out, we'd be grateful so that no one would have to do it. Father, protect us as we go home tonight and over the next hours as this passes by. We pray this in Jesus' name.